G'day folks, this is a little Garrett turbocharger that V8 Jagnut gave me for autopsy. It was replaced because it wasn't operating properly. It hadn't actually blown up, but it's just not working properly. I've inspected the impeller blades and there's no chips or pieces missing from looking from the outside anyway. Likewise with the exhaust turbine, there's no pieces missing. Only thing I can see is there's a bit of lateral play on the shaft and the bearings are a bit stiff. Although it's been sitting outside in the weather for a while in the junk heap, so there's probably water in the bearings anyway. But the only thing I can see of concern is lateral play on the shaft, which causes the impellers to touch the sides. There's a vacuum governor and other stuff there, but I imagine that would be easily replaceable if that were the problem. So I'm going to strip this thing down and just see what the bearings are like. I'm pretty sure that's the only fault with this one. Everything else is pretty good. That's oil discharge and oil inlet. I've already pumped a bit of oil in there to help them out. It does spin if I get the air gun. Not very fast, but it works. Okay, with the exhaust side open, it's pretty easy to see what this governor does. There's a collar in here which has little levers attached to vanes inside the exhaust discharge, and as the governor operates, it either opens or closes those little vanes. They all seem to be working quite well actually, so that's probably not the problem. I think it's just spindle bearings on this one. The spindle's sloppy. Exhaust turbine's fine. I imagine that's titanium or something. And that's the governor hook up there. Fits into that notch and adjusts the exhaust flow accordingly. I'm not a turbo expert, but that's my take on it anyway. I gather most of this is titanium or some similar alloys. Must get bloody hot in there. I know the turbine gets very hot. It is exhaust gas that's going straight through it. Next step's to open up the compressor side, these bolts. Well, this is the variable exhaust vane assembly after removing, and as you can see, this outer collar rotates and these vanes adjust pitch accordingly. Pretty neat little gizmo. Of course these little things pop out, but corrects that. And that's the inside of the housing. It's pretty clean, there's no obvious cracks or anything. This turbo's probably quite rebuildable. The thrust plate for the vane assembly. A very rebuildable little unit. Well, this is the compressor housing off. There's no cracks or anything in it, no obstructions. All the pins are there. It's only axial play in the bearings I can see is the only fault with this one. I'll give it a good clean up, strip the rest of this down, and maybe order some replacement bearings, seals. There's an O-ring there and there's a little steel shim there, and I'll just rebuild it rather than throw it in the scrap bin. A little turbo will go well on the Morris engine or something like that. Might make an interesting project. Well, I've put this assembly back together again. Apparently these bearings are a floating kind, and there is supposed to be a tiny bit of lateral play in the shaft. It spins very freely now. Before it was all gummed up with coke and burnt oil. Obviously they mustn't have had a turbo timer or it wasn't on, and they just burnt the oil into it. The seal on this end's fine. It's a sort of like a piston ring. This end here there isn't really much of a seal, it's just a very neat fit. There is a tiny O-ring in there, but I'll leave it as it is. I'm not going to rebuild this one at the moment, but for now I'll just put it back on the shelf and maybe put it on the Morris engine once I've done the bottom end. Should be a nice little turbo. I'm not sure why it was chucked out, probably because it was gummed up. Either that or the governor was stuffed. I haven't tested that yet. The vacuum diaphragm's fine, but maybe the electrical switch is faulty. So, give this other end a bit of a clean up and chuck it back together. Well folks, this is the finished Garrett variable vane turbocharger. Although the bearings were a bit gummed up with burnt oil, probably from a failed turbo timer or something, there really isn't anything wrong with this turbo. She spins nice and free. Although they are a floating bearing, they're dependent on high oil pressure. The governor checks out just fine, the vane adjustment checks out just fine. There are no cracked or missing vanes, there's no cracks in the housings. So I'd say it's good to go for a small engine that I own. As soon as I get good oil pressure on the Morris, I might try and adapt it. But of course I'll be rebuilding the bottom end before that. But that's on the cards. $100 to rebuild the bottom end and then I'll adapt this to it. Well, thanks for watching folks.